Welcome back, everyone. In our last video, we looked at argument structure or valency and how verbs decide how many arguments they need to form a complete sentence. In this video, we're going to shift gears a bit and focus on another important feature of verbs in English, the active voice and passive voice. So far, most of the sentences we worked with have been in active voice, but English also allows us to create passive sentences. And we're going to break down what that means with a simple example. Here's an active sentence. The girls won the basketball game last night. And here's the same sentence in the passive voice. The basketball game was won by the girls last night. And notice what's happening here. In the passive version, instead of putting the girls first, we start with the basketball game. The object of the active sentence has moved into the subject position, and the original subject, the girls, has been pushed to the end of the sentence, introduced by the word by. So what exactly happens when we change a sentence from active to passive? There's kind of a formula. First, the object of the active sentence becomes the subject of the passive sentence. Second, the subject of the active sentence moves into the object position, usually introduced with the word by. Third, a form of the to be verb is added, like is, was, or were. And finally, the main verb changes into its past participle form. That's the basic recipe for forming a passive sentence. Now, why do we even allow this flip in English? The simple answer is to change the focus of the sentence. In the active sentence, the girls won the game, we're focusing on the players and what they accomplished. In the passive sentence, the game was won by the girls, the focus shifts to the game itself. In English, the beginning of the sentence often carries the most emphasis, so using passive voice is a way to shine the spotlight on a different part of the sentence. How do we know what the subject of a passive sentence is? Remember, the subject always agrees with the verb in person and number. For example, the basketball game was won by the girls. Here, the subject is game, which is singular, so the verb is was. If we make it plural, the basketball games were won by the girls. Even though the girls are doing the action, the subject of the sentence is actually game or games, depending on the verb form. Sometimes passive sentences don't even mention the doer of the action. For example, the homework was completed, or mistakes were made. Now, many of you are probably too young to remember this, myself included, but the last example, if it seems familiar to you or you've heard it before, is because it was used by President Ronald Reagan in response during a scandal during his presidency. And so by using the passive voice, he admitted that mistakes happened, but avoided saying who made them. This is one of the interesting features of passive voice. It lets us talk about an action without naming the person responsible. Passive voice also has very practical uses, especially in scientific writing. It emphasizes the experiment or result and not the researcher. So compare these two sentences. Here's the active voice. I administered 200 milliliters of penicillin to the rats. Or the passive form, 200 milliliters of penicillin were administered to the rats. Both sentences describe the same event, but in the passive version, the I is removed and the procedure becomes the center of attention. And this style is considered more objective, which is why it's so common in scientific articles. So to sum it up, active voice highlights the doer of the action, passive voice highlights the receiver of the action, and sometimes leaves the doer out altogether. Neither voice is better than the other, they just emphasize different parts of the same sentence depending on what we want our readers or listeners to notice. So your key takeaways are, if you want to stress who did the action, use active voice. If you want to stress what happened, or if you don't want to name the doer, passive voice is the way to go. For our next topic in this series, we'll circle back to look at some special verb classes, irregular verbs, which we covered a little already in an earlier video, but also phrasal verbs and light verbs and more. And these are the verbs that don't always follow the standard rules we've been exploring in this series, so they'll give us some interesting new patterns to explore.